look at using systems of equations to solve some types of word problems. Usually problems that deal with two or more unknown values. And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to write two or more equations. You need to write at least as many equations as things you don't know. So if you don't know two things, you need to find two equations to write. If you don't know three things, you need to write three equations, so on. Once we have those equations, then we're going to either use the substitution method or the elimination method to solve that system of equations. And just keep in mind that just because you get one value, you're not done with a system. You need to find both values or all three values, however many different unknowns you have. And because we're doing word problems, we need to identify which solution it goes with which part of the problem we're looking at. So if we're looking at, let's say, investment problems, we need to be clear about, this amount of money was in this account, this amount of money was in this other account. So we can't just give the dollar amounts, we have to also clarify how much is in which account are we talking about. Alright, so it's kind of a simpler type of problem. Here we have two sentences describing how two numbers relate to each other. We're told the sum of two numbers is 20. The difference between 5 and 6 times the smaller number is equal to the larger number. So what we want to do is we want to talk about two numbers here. X is the smaller number, Y is the larger number. You could do it the other way, but this is the way I chose to do it for this problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an equation for this first sentence. The sum of two numbers is 20. So sum refers to addition. So my equation is going to be x plus y equals 20. Now, because I don't know two things, I need two equations. So I need a second equation. So I'm going to go to the second equation. The difference between 5 and 6 times the smaller number is equal to the larger. So the difference means subtraction. 5 minus 6x, 6 times the smaller, so 6x, is equal to the larger, which is y. So 5 minus 6x equals y. Now, if I wanted to do this problem using the elimination method, what I'd want to do is get my x's and y's lined up and move my 5 so it's underneath the 20, and then look to eliminate something. I'm going to instead do substitution. So I'm going to replace the y in the first equation with this expression 5 minus 6x. Since the second equation is already solved for a letter, I thought substitution might be the best approach for this one. So substituting that 5 minus 6x into the first equation in place of y gives me this 5 plus the quantity 5 minus 6x equals 20. Again, looking at that, there's nothing multiplying the quantity, so I can just drop the parentheses and start combining like terms. So I'm going to just start working this out. X minus 6x is negative 5x plus 5. And then just solve this equation like I normally would. Subtract 5 from both sides, getting rid of the constant. And then get rid of the coefficient. Divide both sides by the negative 5. And that gives me x equals negative 3. So that's my small number. I need to now figure out my large number. And so I can substitute this into any equation that has both an x and y. Notice that second equation that I wrote, 5 minus 6x equals y, y is already by itself. So I'm going to substitute it in there. 5 minus 6 times the x value, which I now know is negative 3. And then I'm just going to work that out. Negative 6 times negative 3 is positive 18. 18 plus 5 is 23. So my two numbers are negative 3 and 23. And if I add those together, I get 20. So I satisfy both of these equations. Alright, so let's look at this investment problem. $30,000 was invested into two simple interest accounts, one with a 5.2% interest rate and the other with a rate of 8%. How much was invested in each account if the total annual interest earned is $2,664? So I'm going to write one equation that's going to be based on how much money I put into the accounts. So I don't know how much money I put in the first account. I don't know how much money I put in the second account, but I do know altogether I put $30,000 in there. So if I add those two amounts together, it should be $30,000. I'm also told something about the interest. I'm told that the interest for the first account is 5.2%, the interest for the second account is 8%, and how much total dollars I earned for the whole year is 2,064. Well, to figure out the amount of interest you earn, you take its rate as a decimal times how much money was in there. So how much money was in the first account was X. So I'm going to take 0.052 times X, and I'm going to add that to calculate the interest of the second account, 0.08 times how much money's in there, which is Y. And those are going to equal how much interest I earned for the whole year. So now what I want to do is I want to solve this, and again I could do substitution. I'm going to choose to do elimination. So I'm going to multiply the top equation, all the numbers, by a negative 0.052. That'll cancel out my X terms. So rewriting these, multiply everybody by negative 0.052, so times X times Y and then times 30,000 gives me this new equation. And then if I bring the other equation over, make sure everybody's lined up with each other, and then I'm just going to add down. I'll see the X's will cancel out. 0.08 minus 0.052, that gives me 0.028, and then combine the dollar amounts, and I get 504. Now I'm just going to solve this for Y. Divide both sides by 0.028, the coefficient of Y, and I get Y equals 18,000, which means I have 18,000 in one of my accounts. The question is which account? Because remember, I have to clarify how much money I put into which account. And since this is Y, I'm going to go back earlier when I wrote my two equations, and I'm going to see I put the 8% attached to Y. So this is the 8% account. And since I invested a total of $30,000, since I already have $18,000 in one account, that must mean I have $12,000 in the other account. So I have $18,000 in the 8%, that must mean I have $12,000 in the 5.2%. So make sure you don't just say $18,000 and $12,000. You have to also clarify which account those monies are in. Because if you put $12,000 in the 8% account, that would not give you the correct amount for the whole year. All right, let's look at this problem. Chemist mixes a 75% acid solution with a 35% acid solution to produce 40 milliliters of a 50% acid solution. How many milliliters of each acid were used? So many milliliters of 75 were put together with so many milliliters of 35, and I got 40 milliliters altogether, and it comes out to be a 50% acid. So one of my equations is just going to be how many milliliters of each am I using. So I have X of the first one, I have Y of the second one, and together that should come out to be 40 milliliters. Now, when you're looking at percentages of a solution, then what you do is you multiply the percent times how much solution you have, and that'll tell us how much acid. So I'm going to figure out how much acid is in the first one. Solution, how much acid is in the second solution, and that's going to give me the total amount of acid in my mixture. And so I'm going to multiply each of these values by their appropriate percentage of acid. So 75% times X, 35% times Y, and 50% times 40. And that's going to be my acid problem. So the first equation represents just how much solution, which includes acid and water, just all together. The second equation is just about the acid. So acid from the first one plus acid from the second one equals acid for the total mixture. And then I'm going to, again, I could do substitution, move one of the letters over to the side with the X plus Y equals 40, but I'm just going to get rid of my Y's here, so I'm going to multiply, do elimination, multiply everybody in the top equation by a negative 0.35, so that'll give me a negative 0.35Y and a positive 0.35Y, and that'll cancel those out. So rewriting this, distribute that, times the X, times the Y, times the 40, gives me this new equation. And then I'm going to move this other one over, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply 40 times 0.5, so 20, and I'm going to add 0.4x equals 6. Notice my y's canceled out. Divide both sides by 0.4, and I get x equals 15. And again, I have to say which solution this was from, and again, because this is x, I have 15 milliliters Looking back at my earlier equations, I put the 0.75 attached to the x, so this is 15 milliliters of the 75. Since I have 40 milliliters altogether, that means I have 25 milliliters of the 35%.